Om Tat Sat. Om Satyanandam. Om Paravak Shakti. Om blesses convergence in all its phenomenal aspecting, seen and unseen. Om God speaking directly to God about God. Om. Om, the 17th live stream teaching of SATYAVEDISM. Om, Sadhana as discipline and commitment to God realization. Lssv 17. Om. 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 One is already God. And this needs to be stated many, many times. Ad infinitum. Om. One is already God. Om. God absolute, then God manifest. Om. Om. Sadhana is spiritual practice toward realization, toward self-realization, toward God realization, toward the realization of what one already is. There is, never-ending speculation in eternity as to why sadhana is necessary, why spiritual practice is implemented when, upon realization, it is known that what one is always already what one is as God. So the question might be, why bother with sadhana? Why bother with spiritual practice if, quote, I am already what I am, then why is it necessary to even consider Om. God manifests as seemingly pointing toward spiritual practice or revealing spiritual practice that is in fact God manifesting itself. It's all is God. So sadhana is phenomenal God manifesting. Spiritual practice is God manifesting, as is all other phenomenal activities. So this is the clearing away, or the reduction, or the completely transformational obliterating of knowledge, of seeming knowledge, that is in fact not true information. So as long as there is beliefing occurring about fictional information, information that is not true about reality. It does not describe reality as it is. As long as that continues to occur, and there is no feeling and knowing directly that all is God. So in fact, it is not a waking up, because God is already awake, always. So it is a clearing process. And even when that seeming clearing process seems to be complete in some way, then there is all the clearing of all other phenomenon that is fictional as well, that does not seem to be local. And in fact, there is no locality in God. So that all is an illusion. So it's endless clearing of misinformation. Now in God Absolute, all is perfect. And nothing has ever happened. And this is truth. But it has to be realized. In a sense, what good is it if it is not realized? Now, God realization, or self-realization, and again, these are different, and this has been explicated and is to be more so. Self-realization, there are glimpses that can happen immediately. But then there is the pseudo-ego behavioring that continues to manifest as it seemingly usually does. And these perceptions or interpretations of all other phenomenon that seem to be of the external world will continue to be misinterpreted. So even if there are glimpses of the true self, what benefit are the glimpses if all the phenomenon sort of pollution continues to reconfigure? What good is it to seemingly glimpse a direct view seemingly of the true self, and then go on as seeming business as usual? It is apparently completely transformational and affects all God phenomenon seemingly drastically. So, although there are ways to glimpse this, mostly it's temporary, and then it reconfigures and continues on as seemingly normal behavioring, and that is not true, permanent realization. And spiritual stories and narratives, any linearity, any kind of story about of spiritual experiences is another form of dreaming, as has already been spoken of in the teachings. But this needs to be spoken of until it is absorbed in God consciousness, that spiritual experiences, or even accruing spiritual experiences, and then speaking of them as if they are present experiences, when it is all just memory. That is not permanent God realization. Oh, so sadhana and spiritual practices are not to accrue spiritual experiences and then feel that the more and more experiences because of practicing, that the more is accomplished. It is not about accomplishing anything. So as long as there's feeling that there is no direct realization, that basically blows away the pseudo-egoing and belief in the pseudo-egoing of seeming others and all the fictional collective information that is not real. As long as that has not occurred, or seemingly, as long as it is not obvious and can be seen through, that all of that is not real, then it is advised that what is called sadhana, which is spiritual practice, be taken up and continued in eternity, as fresh, as new, as always, well, not new, but as always occurring in eternity, right now. And the more that this is absorbed, but the more that the beliefs and the memories, etc., can be deconstructed, so that they will not continue to reconfigure all the associations that are not real. Associations such as that quote, I am a parent to so and so who is the son or daughter, gendered entity, etc. As long as there are beliefs that is actually real, then there is still dreaming. All seeming apparent bodies, objects, etc., all have to be seen through as what is truly phenomenon, what is actually the beauty of the manifesting that is occurring in a certain configuration that seems to be a form. That there are no labels that can be put on, relational labels to such miraculous occurrencing. To put a label on it is a seeming attempt at an understanding about a seeming object that can never, it can never occur that way. That is not the way to know it. So that even my offspring, mine, it's dreaming about possessiveness of or what this is. It's a collective, hypnotism of an easy way to present what this seeming object is, some neat package of what it is. And then, but unfortunately, it is believed that way. It is not even seen through as that simply this is a label and it's pointing to this. And it's just an easy way of expressing what this is, but it is known that this is not what it is, and this label is ridiculous. And the language has so hypnotized and continues to so hypnotize. And then the seeming thought limitations because of it, of the language and the teaching of such limitations, etc. and all. So if there is believing in such linguistic representations of reality that are not in fact true at all, then there has to be a continued, the taking up of spiritual practice that is to break this down and dissolve it, and dissolve these beliefs. It is the tearing down of the superimposition of fiction upon reality. So that is true spiritual practice, or the various ways in which that can occur. Now, sadhana, spiritual practice, in SATYAVEDISM, there are, and to be, many practices from which to choose, and some core practices as well, in order for this dehypnotization to occur, this deconstruction. And some of the prevalent ways, in a sense, of the spiritual practice using natural substances or chemicals in order to take shortcuts and circumvent more difficult reconfiguring, may assist in that, but is not in any way a substitute, a hack, a shortcut. Because the windows may open and then close again. And will become dependency upon substances. Self-realization and God-realization should not have to be dependent upon anything. It is not. It need not be. So the various sadhana spiritual practices, not to be accumulated, simply to assist in the deconstructing and the dehypnotization that leads to self-realization. And then the various practices that lead to God realization, which involves God manifestation and God manifesting. So the seeming qualifications for God realization, all is qualified. It is for God Omni, Om. But Om, if there are to be very sadhana spiritual practices, not for accumulated knowledge, in order to get rid of accumulated knowledge. Accumulated knowledge is useless. If it has anything to do with the story of one's life, etc., it needs to be obliterated. There is no little life. No limitations. So nothing to be accumulated. So as for sadhana, there must be seriousness about implementing the practices. Now, sadhana and spiritual practices are not mandatory. Nothing is. They are all recommended, highly recommended. Oh, theoretically, there can just be, the body can just be sitting and doing absolutely nothing. And there could be self-realization. But of course, the body is never doing nothing, because the body is a process, an endless processing of many, many functions and processings. So even if the body looks like it is sitting doing nothing, it cannot possibly be sitting doing nothing. However, if it appears that way, theoretically, there can be God realization from doing absolutely nothing. That is not likely. So there has to be seriousness about implementing the practices, the spiritual practices. This is not to be taken lightly. This is not entertainment or a hobbyism. Or practice that can be utilized and then discarded, put down, and then taken back up at seeming random. Just casually. Sadhana and spiritual practice is not a casual endeavor. So although self-realization and God realization can occur seemingly in eternity, it can look like it can take forever. It can look like it can happen quickly. But that is just how it appears. That cannot be put in an activity vacuum as if it can be excerpted from the whole rest of God reality. So the appearances of phenomena such as that can never be evaluated that way. what happens quickly and what happens slowly. Nothing can be evaluated that way. And in fact, there is no time, so it all happens, as does all God manifestation happen in eternity. Om. So, Om, there has to be great seriousness. What is called determination, dedication, indefatigable discipline, the feeling that there is nothing else that is desired except God realization. The sort of determination that in fiction can be labeled going after a goal endlessly. There has to be no doubt that God realization can occur. This is not some phantom made up the information that is not attainable. There has to be absorbing in God consciousness. That one is God right now in eternity. And that all there needs to be is the clearing of all of this misinformation about God reality. And that the pseudo-ego is not real. In fact, it is not an entity. It is a process. It's processing. Pseudo-ego-wing. There is no entity. So there is no entity that needs to be gotten rid of. It is a process that has to be replaced or reconfigured until it is no longer recognizable as that. Etc. It is not just about pseudo-egoing. It is about the whole God manifesting and the overstanding of God reality, of whole God reality. So the seriousness of approach of Sadhana, spiritual practice, it is not to gain something for the seeming self. There is no seeming selfish motive. Even the possible seeming selfish motive of wanting relief from suffering, if it could be considered as such. Because in seemingly going toward self-realization and God realization, it is not about getting anything from any process. It is not self-centered in that way, small self-centered. Because if it is approached as such, then there might be at some point, seemingly, where the pseudo-selfing will seem to be satisfied with however the configuring is appearing and proclaim that this is it, or this is good enough, or I've never thought it'd get to this point. This is fine. All good. And then not break through to self-realization, full God realization, permanent. So that sort of stage of satisfaction can occur. And that's still dreaming. That's the pseudo-ego, the spiritual pseudo-ego dreaming, pseudo-egoing at having gotten to a certain point where this is sufficient or wonderful. Fine, this is great. Om. So the pseudo-egoing is determining where the leveling is occurring and is, as such, still continuing the dream, albeit a spiritual dreaming. So that is not the seeming goal of sadhana, of spiritual practice, of SATYAVEDISM. Om. That is why this cannot be approached lightly or casually or as one of many activities seemingly in a seeming life that does not exist as such. There has to be seeming desiring for wanting to know reality. Not for wanting to get something in order to function within fiction reality or to feel better in fiction reality. It is about wanting to break through into true reality. And seemingly in fiction, most God in the form of seeming, most in fiction, in relativity, have either not heard about it or would not be interested. Even though there is much speaking about breaking out of the matrix, etc. What is seen as the matrix can, in fiction, be interpreted as in many different ways. What is the matrix? Is it a political matrix? What is it exactly when they're speaking about the matrix? What is that? It from all different seeming perspectives, it can be described as in many, many different ways what the matrix actually is. As a metaphor, or as seemingly describing reality in some way. And the breaking out of it, the matrix, exiting the matrix, whatever that is. Again, that is a metaphor for at the seeming highest level of wanting to know what reality is and to not seemingly participate in illusion. But there are seeming many that just would desire to just function really well in the matrix and are not aware of what the matrix actually is. Just want to lead a happy, normal seeming life in the matrix without knowing whether it's a matrix or not. Again, that is the pseudo-egoing about a configuration of a conceptual configuration of superimposition upon reality, and being satisfied with it or not. Oh, sadhana, spiritual practice, this is all spoken about directly, so that there aren't any misinterpretations of what the practice is for. So there has to be phenomenon, a dedication and determined nature about realizing, about clearing all of this out of the way. And then once there is clearing, there is God manifesting of more clearing that does not seem to be local, in which there is no locality. It's about the evolving God evolution, the God transcension. So it may appear to be endless in a certain way. Certain aspectings may appear to be endless, because there is no stopping of such a processing. Because God manifesting is endlessly processing. But yes, there is a realization. And it may appear to seem to feel like there are stages to it. But it is all taking place in God eternity. And then there is a realization that it is really effortless, even though it may appear not to be effortless. It can, in certain ways, appear to be struggle. So one of the main practices, sadhanas, of SATYAVEDISM is linguistic reprogramming, which facilitates the dehypnotization and the deconstruction of the language that is being used to perpetuate falsity. So it is one of the main aspects is about the evolution of language as a spiritual practice. And it may seem difficult, because although there is neuroplasticity in scientific terms, the rewiring of those networks of association, etc., may appear to be difficult, because the spontaneous reaction might be to speak as the deep learning has configured by repetition. So there are to be more teachings about linguistic deconstruction and Godlang in SATYAVEDISm. About eliminating certain aspects of the linguistics of the language that would be primarily used, or language as God in the form of, and to alter the way in which they are, those languages are used in order to rewire, recircuit, rethink, think toward God reality, God thought. Now this may appear to be superfluous. It may appear to be not necessary in some way. It may be seemingly undesirable because it may seem difficult. It may be the not wanting to appear to sound different, wanting to fit in, wanting to fit into fiction, because it does not feel somehow or other right to speak in some other way. And that is because there's been programming as such to make it feel that that is the way that the speech should be. But this is not about mimicking. It is not about the quest for fitting in. And there is no entity to fit into anything. So it is a re-education that involves the breaking down of educational processes heretofore that in eternity that have been non-successful, basically, because all that points to fiction is not successful in terms of what is called education. Education is not about the proliferation of dreaming. So there are God in the form of and the happening of many sadhanas, spiritual practices that can be utilized. But there has to be real devotion and dedication to wanting to break through to what one is already as God. Already. Because this is directly speaking to God about God. And all sadhanas and spiritual practices are actually of God. Phenomenon. So know if that there is speaking about self-realization or God realization, and there is feeling that somehow or other the reality of a seeming species is just normal, and the fitting in that and the speaking as such like that, that not only is that not toward God evolution, but it cannot be considered self-realization and God realization. It would be spiritual dreaming. There has to be seriousness, and there has to be in God the absorption of this God information right now in eternity, that this is truth. So that there should be no settling in the dream for anything less. No settling. No continuation of the dreaming in various forms, endlessly. Om, dedication and devotion to God realization. Determined discipline, even if it may at first appear to be inconvenient, quote unquote, or feel like it is too hard or too difficult or whatever. Eventually those seeming feelings pass, and it is part that it is part of the process to go through seeming configurations of feelings such as that. But that is not, should not dissuade from the continuation of the passing through all of that phenomenon that is to clear. There has to be an innate knowing. This is speaking directly to God consciousness. Knowing that this is. The God truth resonating. So there should be no dreaming of settling for less. There has to be God willingness to transcend all of the illusion. And there is God knowing. That although it may seem in the dream as difficult, that it is not only possible, it is inevitable. Om. Om. Dedication to truth. Om. Devotion to truth. Om. The willingness not to stop at anything. Om. Om. And there, again, there is no need in fictional relationships that are not real to discard any as being detrimental to the goals of realization, and all the various stories that are propagated about throwing one's relationships out if they're not suiting the realization and all that. That is, stories like that are not true are basically a way to guard the pseudo-egoing when there are feelings of threat to the goal. But that is the pseudo-egoing trying to guard from the other pseudo-egoing, and it's in the dream as being maybe not strong enough to take such spiritual practices on in the midst of exactly what the circumstances are, in fact. Not to escape and to seemingly go somewhere else in infinity in order to accomplish the spiritual practice, or what is called good company versus bad company, and all of those configurations that are not really true. That is part of the spiritual dreaming teachings that are sometimes offered for self-realization that need not be believed. God in the form of, in the happening of spiritual practices, can seemingly take place in God infinity, exactly where the seeming bodies appear to be located in infinity. The body that you are, that one is not. So is there no seeming to have to run away in order to practice? As a matter of fact, the very practices can be toward the seeming unity of those seeming bodies around. That is spiritual practice, because that is toward God realization, and in God reality, that all is oneself. So there can be no running away from oneself, God's self. Those spiritual practicings, sadhana, can occur right now in eternity, right now in infinity, without having to acquire any God in the form of seeming objects or situationing, etc. All there has to be is, in God consciousness, a determination to know God reality. But serious no stopping, no taking breaks. No recreation, no compartmentalization of it as an activity. The application of spiritual practice is toward all that is occurring. Whatever is God manifesting, there should be spiritual practice, applying the spiritual practicings, the sadhana, at all times in eternity, times, in all situationings. Now, it might seem difficult, but it is not, because God manifesting is, in fact, in God reality, it is effortless. The fictioning, the believing is that it may appear to be difficult, but in fact, it is effortless. Because God manifesting, it just spontaneously happens, it occurs. That's all about the illusion of it, is that there are difficulties, etc. Perhaps the seeming body has sensations of difficulties or but there should be no settling for anything is called self-realization or is called God realization. If there are still feelings of all the seeming emotions and various what would be called species beliefs and feelings, etc. If all of that is still occurring, then let it be known that it is not permanent self-realization and permanent God realization. It is some belief that there is some level that has been reached where this is it. This must be it. Feels great. This must be it. Or, yes, there is knowing, but life goes on as species being in the species environment. No, no, that is not where it stops. No, no. No settling. Determination. Real determination to know God reality. Not to settle for any species plateau. In fiction, there is so much that can be said about this. But the main teaching about the necessity for sadhana or spiritual practice is that there must be absolute determination for permanent realization. So this is a calling in God consciousness for God manifest, activate, and so it is. Om. God speaking directly to God about God. Om. Paravak Shakti. Om. Satyanandam. Om. Tat Sat.